performing satirist Dave Lippman with comments by Andrés Tomás Conteres of Democracy Now! In Espanol at the Park Slope United Methodist Church on 6th Avenue and 8th Street in Brooklyn. Take the F train to 4th Avenue. A fundraiser for School of the Americas Watch, New York City, sponsored by them, the Latin America Committee of Brooklyn for Peace, and the Church Social Justice Committee. For more information, 201-207-1493 and brooklynforpeace.org. Hope to see you there.
On Labor Day, Monday, September the 5th, 99.5 FM WBAI in New York will continue its tradition of live coverage of the West Indian American Day Carnival Association's Parade of the Bands on Eastern Parkway. Beginning at 1 a.m., La Nueva Alternativa Latina will begin this special day of programming, followed by live coverage of the Juve Morning celebration. At 6 a.m., BAI will feature news and culture of the Caribbean. Then once the bands begin appearing at our broadcast booth on Eastern Parkway and Bedford Avenue, 99.5 FM will bring you live and colorful coverage of Whitaker's 44th Labor Day Parade. BAI's coverage will conclude when the last band crosses Whitaker's reviewing stand at the Brooklyn Museum at 6 p.m. Join us!
There's a Hole in the City by Richard Bowes. Wednesday, 9/12/01. On the evening of the day after the towers fell, I was waiting by the barricades on Houston Street on LaGuardia Place.
On Sunday, September 11th, as part of WBAI's special anniversary programming, the next hour, with guest host Jim Freund, will feature this award-winning story, followed by an interview with Rick Bowes and the preeminent psychologist on contemporary terrorism, Dr. Charles B. Strozier. That's September 11th at 11 a.m. on the next hour, featuring Richard Bowes reading There's a Hole in the City.
This is Phil Donahue, and you're listening to WBAI New York, 99.5.
Greetings and welcome to Walden's Pond on the September 4th, 2011, Labor Day weekend. Good afternoon, one and all. My name is Shelton Walden, and we are here every Sunday with Walden's Pond, the weekly radio program that discusses health, culture, politics, and so much more. We're grateful to be here on this Sunday. This afternoon, we'll be talking with Georganne Chapin of Intact America, talking about the latest developments on the fight against genital mutilation in this country, some about the events, particularly out in California and elsewhere. And we'll be looking forward to 9/11 and thinking about that day 10 years ago. That and so much more on this edition of Walden's Pond. Stay with us. 101 is the time, and good afternoon, one and all. I'm Shelton Walden, back again here live at the moment here on WBAI on this late summer Sunday in New York City. Rather muggy outside right now, but Labor Day is here, and we hope you're having a good, and will have a good weekend as you go out and about and barbecue, etc. It promises to be a very, very fun weekend for all, following the events of last weekend when it was not so fun with the hurricane and all. People are still recovering from Hurricane Irene. And so hopefully by this time next week, everyone who has need of electricity will have it. It's been a devastating week for many, and it continues to be. Just let you know that WBAI will have special programming next Sunday here, all day, special 9/11 coverage. We will not be here this next Sunday, but we hope that you'll tune in to WBAI for that day, and also special fundraising programming the 2 days following that. Also, tomorrow, Labor Day, WBAI will be having special Labor Day coverage from the Parkway. So please tune in for that. Also, we hope that you'll honor your pledge from the recently concluded membership drives. And we hope that you'll send your funds in as soon as possible. It promises to be a very momentous week in this country because of the President Obama, will be giving a long-awaited speech on jobs, which are desperately needed in a greatly divided country. And it's been divided probably ever since 9/11. We were just talking about that here in the studio a few minutes ago, about that day 10 years ago, how the events of that day affected WBAI. We were on the air, we were broadcasting, and then all heck broke loose. And people were scrambling to get information, and there were people on the air. I think some of that will be aired next Sunday at the actual time, an actual broadcast of that morning from WBAI 10 years ago. So hopefully you'll tune in for that next Sunday. This afternoon, I want to share with you an interview I did yesterday with Georganne Chapin. She's the president of Intact America, an organization dedicated to protecting children from genital mutilation in this country. And we were discussing some of the latest developments on that issue. Of course, this show has been covering that issue for quite a long time. And it's a concern to both people here and abroad, because there are not only events happening here, but also events happening in Africa and elsewhere to try to end this. But it's obviously it received a lot of attention, and people are discussing it. So we discussed that with Georganne Chapin, an expert on this and on this issue, and the president of Intact America. And we started off our discussion yesterday talking about the developments in California as related to this issue, the ongoing the ongoing efforts to try to stop a ban on circumcision in California by the state legislature, which is quite interesting. So we talked about that and many other things, and we talked about that with Georganne Chapin of Intact America. So stay with us here on WBAI here in New York City. At the time it's 1:05, and hope you're having a very good afternoon.
There was a bill in San Francisco. I think you've talked about it on your program earlier. Activists in San Francisco collected signatures for. They got about 12,000 signatures. They needed 7,000, and they collected signatures to get a measure on the ballot in San Francisco that would ban the circumcision of minors. And the exception was for medically necessary circumcision. Now we all know that circumcision in an infant is virtually never medically necessary, and seldom in the rest of a male's life either. But this allowed an exception for medically necessary circumcisions, and the measure was, they got the signatures, and the measure was going to be on the ballot. And a group of people, primarily spearheaded by the Anti-Defamation League and later joined by other religious groups and by doctors, who of course would have lost the income from circumcision, got together and opposed the bill. And it turned out that there was a preemption issue. There was a law in California that said that municipalities cannot essentially regulate the practice of medicine, and so that was probably the strongest argument of the opponents of this bill, and they probably might have been able to overturn it just with that, but they didn't stop there. They instead claimed that to ban medically unnecessary circumcision of minors violated religious freedom. And they cited the Jewish custom of circumcision, and they also threw in Muslims, although for most Muslims it's cultural practice. It's not a religious mandate per se. People who give immense credence to various texts, religious written texts. The Quran does not mandate circumcision for what it's worth. But Muslims practice female and male circumcision commonly. So that was the opposition, and then so that's going to be tied up in an appeal, but in the meantime, the same group opposing the bill proposed a bill to the California legislature that said it would be essentially illegal to make circumcision illegal, if you can imagine, to make male circumcision illegal. Of course, female circumcision is already illegal, right?
Yes.
So that's where it stands now. The bill passed the California Senate. Now, it didn't pass as a standalone bill. It was thrown in with, I believe, some environmental bill. It was a rider or something, and I can't give you all the detail, but that's where it stands now. I think the short explanation of what's going on is that there's immense fear among doctors and among certain small segments of the Jewish community that by exposing circumcision for what it's worth, they will start to look really bad. Doctors for charging and practicing this medically unnecessary mutilation of boys, and religious groups for insisting that it's part of their religious freedom to maim their children. We know that courts don't agree in general. The courts have said that your religious beliefs, you're free to hold them, but you're not free to harm others as a result of those beliefs. So you can believe that handling poisonous snakes, that you'll be protected if you're a God-fearing person, but you can't put a poisonous snake in your child's crib. Well-settled law that Jehovah's Witnesses who do not believe in blood transfusions cannot withhold blood transfusions from their children if their children's lives are threatened. Well-settled laws that Christian Scientists must take their children for medical treatment, irrespective of what the parents believe, if the child's life is in danger. So this is clearly, male circumcision is clearly enjoying a whopping exception to established law, and it's extremely unfortunate for the babies, and it's extremely unfortunate that we have that this has been turned into an issue where people like me and like you and like others who can see clearly what chopping off part of a boy's genitals means, that that attempts are being made to cast us as being against a particular religion or hating a particular religion. It's really very unfortunate. I'm a little surprised that this initiative started in California, because California has been a state that has been open to new ideas, and particularly it wouldn't be, at least I would have thought, wouldn't have been so pro-circumcision, if you will. I don't think California as a state is pro-circumcision. I think that California has a very low rate of infant circumcision, probably somewhere in the 20%, 20 to 30, very, very low. The other thing, of course, is that most Jews do not circumcise their children in religious rituals. They might have their children circumcised in hospitals, just like others do, and many Jews are not circumcising their children at all anymore. I think what you're seeing is pure and simply, I think you're seeing backlash from minority segments of these communities, and it just like, we use the phrase playing the race card in order to intimidate people from speaking the truth, and this is playing the religion card in order to intimidate people from speaking the truth. But the truth is that cutting off part of the baby boy's penis is wrong. And there are many, many progressive Jews who believe that, and there are people of all religious persuasions who believe that, and certainly the baby boys who are lying there and assaulted when they're a few days old by having part of their penis cut off, they believe that. Religious freedom is, of course, a complete red herring here, because what about the freedom of the child?
Yes.
The child doesn't have any religious beliefs yet. It's interesting, many fundamentalist Christians, I shouldn't say many, there is a segment of fundamentalist Christianity that believes that circumcision is biblically mandated. Of course, it is in the Old Testament. They think of it as a higher or more devout religious practice, but many do not. And of course, I was on a show on Pat Robertson's network. They also believe that they don't christen their children at birth or when they're a few days old. They wait until they are of an age, usually adolescence, where they can declare their religious belief, where they can freely accept Jesus as their Savior, and that is when they are baptized. So there is within Christianity and most, many religions, the idea that a person becomes of an age where a religious acceptance or a religious conversion is meaningful. Certainly having part of your body chopped off when you're too young to express any ideas can't be a spiritual experience for the child.
Absolutely not. Well, do you think these kind of initiatives to prevent? To me, it is in some ways try to prevent people from speaking out about these issues.
Yes, it is exactly trying to. One phenomenal thing is that the ACLU of Northern California, in their friend of the court brief, their amicus brief, they argued that to let this initiative go forward on the ballot would create religious divisiveness. So they wanted to squelch not only people's right to vote on this issue after collecting the requisite number of signatures, they wanted to squelch people's right to talk about it on the grounds that it was too divisive to discuss. I find that almost a gift to our movement, really. If we have an issue that people are afraid of talking about, then we have a really big problem. If people are afraid that by talking about circumcision, it might stop, then we better talk about it. Right? Sort of like we can't talk about slavery. Yeah. We can't talk about sex. We all know how well that works, with our kids, right? So if talking about this is somehow going to fracture the society, then we got a problem.
Well, this is very interesting for the ACLU to take up a position like this when, several years ago they took up they supported the right of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois. And a lot of people were some people were very upset about their position about that, but they support the right of free speech. Now,
right. Well, apparently not if you're talking about circumcision.
That's very ironic, isn't it?
No, yeah, it's very ironic. Now, of course, what we're talking about is the ACLU of Northern California. We're talking about a chapter of the ACLU. I am attempting to get in touch with Anthony Romero, who's the executive director of the National ACLU, to have this discussion. And this is the National ACLU, so far as I've seen, has not taken an official position on this. So it would be very interesting to see. I don't know how the ACLU is structured. I don't know whether the local chapters have free rein in engaging in taking positions. I really just don't know. So we'll see how it unfolds. We'll see how much support or congruence they get from other chapters or from the national organization.
muffling.
And so we can't even vote on it, right?
Right.
We collected, the California activists collected 12,000 signatures, and the ACLU is actually coming out against the right to vote on this issue by the people of California. That is, to me, unbelievable.
Yeah, it is pretty unbelievable. It's quite interesting. What nerves this issue touches out here.
Yeah.
And
of course, the other part that's emerging, you see, what happens is when something is a very minority viewpoint, or there's a small number of people who are putting it forward, and nobody else really takes it seriously, or hasn't grown to a movement, then there's not a lot of backlash, right? So we can consider ourselves, we in the anti-activist movement, very, very successful at achieving change, because now people are scared. And the two groups, as I said, who are scared here are religious groups and doctors. And when the doctors, I've never ever had a doctor tell me, I do circumcisions because I make a lot of money. They all say, I only do circumcisions because parents want it. But if doctors are fighting for the right to continue to practice medically unnecessary surgery on children who cannot consent to it, to me that speaks to the commercial nature of the practice. And at an average of $200 per circumcision, and it's probably low, that's about a $200 million industry just for routine, basic circumcision. When you factor in the number of complications, botches, redos, cosmetic revisions, you're talking about many, many, many times that amount of money being utterly wasted in our medical system, but going into the pocket of physicians. And to me, again, that tells us what we're looking at. We're looking at a primitive ritual that some people want to hold on to that makes money for other people who want to hold on to it.
Absolutely. We're talking on the phone with Georganne Chapin. She's the president of Intact America. We're talking about the issue of male circumcision and genital mutilation here in this country. Before I go any further with some other questions I want to ask you, some of the latest news I read in the last few days is out of the country of Zimbabwe, where there's a circumcision drive. Circumcision, there's been a real target, as you well know, there's been a real targeting of Africa for circumcision. Where in Zimbabwe,
because that's what Africa needs more than anything. They don't need clean water and good medical care. They need circumcision. And out of the last few days, there's been reports Zimbabwe. Some of the Zimbabwean ministers are in the government are going to undergo circumcision in order to show as a way to curb the spread of HIV. And some of the ministers are going for it. One minister said that he said, "Well, I'll go for it." A minister there said that he would go for it himself. And that ministers are role models. If they were to go for male circumcision, it would encourage more males to follow suit. And then another minister said that he disagreed with that totally, and he said that I thought this was really bizarre. But we're saying, look, as much as we have to subscribe to the notion of male circumcision, I do not personally believe in it, and my children will not be circumcised. He also said that if you have to coerce me to do it, then you'll be violating my personal right on my body. This is part of the madness connected to people without ideas but who want to remain relevant. It is, and he talked about we should be focusing on issues that help people than focusing on useless things. No, we couldn't say it better ourselves. Correct?
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting, that people are standing up against this absurd idea that by circumcising the male population of the country, you're going to prevent the transmission of HIV, or you're going to prevent people from getting AIDS. Of course, we know if that were true, that the AIDS epidemic would not have run rampant through the homosexual population of the United States and then later other populations, starting in the 1980s, circumcision does not prevent HIV. I'm sure everybody listening to your program knows people who have died of AIDS and have AIDS, and it does not prevent HIV in men. It doesn't prevent it in women. There are some studies from sub-Saharan Africa that purport to have shown a significant reduction in female-to-male transmission of HIV if men are circumcised. It's not shown any reduction in male-to-female, which is a warning sign. Men stop using condoms because they believe they're not going to get it. Their partners can still get it. And there's a very recent study that was published. I don't have the citation. I can somehow make it available to you or to your listeners. Well, you know what? We'll post it on the Intect America website, www.intectamerica.org.
Yes.
From Zambia, and they found absolutely no relationship between HIV prevalence and circumcision status. There are those of us, not irresponsible people. I mean, we are educated doctors and lawyers like myself and people who've paid a lot of attention to this, who really believe that the randomized clinical trial information is either fixed or not true. Plus, even if you look at it, it doesn't show that circumcision prevents AIDS. If you take it at its purported value, it reduces transmission from female to male, but in no other way. And of course, it also doesn't do anything to reduce transmission from medically unsafe practices and the sharing or a repeated use of contaminated medical instruments, which is a huge problem in the third world, and probably how HIV is spread to at least an important degree.
Yeah. It's really, again, it's remarkable that I know it sounds rather maybe I don't know how to describe it, but I'm just always dumbfounded at the insistence of proponents to try to push this issue for circumcision in Africa, that it prevents this, when there's at least from my perspective, many people, that there's absolutely no evidence that this would prevent HIV. When right here in the United States we have had one of the highest rates of HIV, and we've been circumcising children massively since the 1950s and 40s.
There's also a very contrived explanation of how it works, and if you buy that explanation, actually you would have to buy the explanation that women should be circumcised too. You'd have to remove their outer and inner labia, because by reducing the mucosal tissue, the argument is that you make it less possible for the virus to penetrate the skin. So that argument would tend to suggest that women also should be circumcised. And of course, nobody's suggesting that.
Absolutely.
So, including myself, of course.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's back in the late 19th century, circumcision was claimed to cure tuberculosis, but we still drag out the cervical cancer excuse, which has been totally debunked, and we're still dragging out the HIV excuse. If we infibulated women, sewed them up, there'd be far less premarital sex. It'd also be far less HIV, because they couldn't have intercourse. So would we want to do that? We want to cut people's noses. We could cut off people's noses and their ears, too, and prevent probably most skin cancer in countries where people have some exposure. We could cut off women's breasts to prevent breast cancer. We could pull people's teeth to prevent dental caries, and on and on. So we cut out people's tongues to prevent tongue cancer, which is far more common than is penile cancer.
Absolutely.
We don't really consider those options.
Yeah, well, no.
Thank goodness, right?
I feel like I'm living in an alternate universe sometimes with folks. Yeah. But let me ask you.
I think the most important thing to remember for people to do is to kind of clear away all the hype and all the sort of magical thinking and say, all right, if I was standing on a street corner and I had never heard of circumcision, and I'm standing on the street corner with my pregnant spouse. And somebody came up to me and said, I have this really good idea. If your baby's a boy, why don't you chop off the end of his penis? Right? I mean, someone comes up to you and says that. You would think this person was completely insane,
No,
right?
absolutely.
Right? So, but somehow, and let's take it even more. Let's say they said, let's chop off the tiniest tip of one of your baby's toes. Or let's chop off the tiniest tip of his earlobe. You would think that person was insane. And yet, somebody comes up to you after you've had a baby in the hospital and says, they don't say, let's cut off the end of his penis. They say, well, of course you're going to have him circumcised.
Right.
And of course that sounds like some kind of a scientific question, right? Or a scientific procedure. But you're chopping off the end of your child's penis. And the part that you're chopping off is the equivalent in an adult male to about 15 square inches of heavily nerve and blood vessel laden tissue, right? It's the size of a 3x5 index card, the foreskin of an intact adult male. And that's what you're taking away from your baby when you circumcise him. Now, think of any other 15 square inch piece of your body that you'd be willing to give up. I can't think of any I'd want to give up. My scalp, the palm of my hand.
That's right.
You know, I think.
No, it's completely off the hook. Let's talk a little bit about what Intact America is doing. I understand that you'll be up in Boston at the AAP.
The American Academy of Pediatrics is meeting in Boston in the first week in October, and Intact America will be there. We're going to have a booth inside. We have one at the AAP every year, and this year the booth we're combining with the NOCIRC, the National Organization of Circumcision Information Resource Centers. We're having a joint presence there, and Marilyn Milos, the founder of NOCIRC, will be there, as will I, and we have some other wonderful educators who are going to be at our booth. We will also be taking an ad out in the Boston Globe asking pediatricians to put down the knife. We have our 2011 effort is a Put Down the Knife campaign. We took that line, of course, from Penn Jillette, from Penn and Teller, did a video on circumcision, and at the end he says, put down the knife and step away from the baby. So we're asking pediatricians, obstetricians, family physicians, and anybody else who circumcises babies to put down the knife. We also will be inviting doctors to come to our booth to learn why they should stop circumcising babies. Many doctors are uncomfortable with it. They haven't thought enough about why they're doing it and why they should stop. We also are really making an effort to call people's attention, doctors and other people's attention to the serious harms of circumcision, the complications, the risks of even death. There have been several infant deaths in the last 3 or 4 years in the United States. We calculate about 100 a year. There's a peer-reviewed article in a journal that came out last year that estimates, I think, 117 deaths from circumcision. Many, many, many more serious complications. And we want doctors to think about that. Most of those mishaps are caused in the course of so-called routine circumcisions. This could happen to any doctor. All the more reason not to do medically unnecessary procedures, and especially on tiny little babies who can't consent. So we're calling doctors' attention to that. And then we're also talking about the Circumcision Harms Survey. There's an independent survey that's been out there on the web for a few months now, and it's men writing about what circumcision. They take a survey, and then there's an open-ended question section about what circumcision has, what the results have been for them. And, some cases, the men who filled it out, talk about minor harm or not particularly any harm. But, of course, many of the people who are going to take this, and there are up to several hundred men so far, have very sad stories to tell. Actually, I read it recently, because you can read the results that are ongoing, the collection of results is ongoing, and I found myself crying as I was reading it. I was shocking myself actually with how appalling and moving it was for me to read these stories of men who were so angry, so sad, and so damaged by being assaulted as infants, and some of them a little older, lied to later. Many of them didn't really realize that some of the sexual and physical problems they were having were due to circumcision. There are several of the men who took the survey said, "I just thought that's how it was." You know, they didn't realize that what they were experiencing was not normal. That if they had their normal body, they wouldn't be experiencing that. So we're talking about that with doctors too, and you know, we're not trying to cause doctors trouble. We just want them to stop cutting baby boys. We're not trying to you know, spread hate or spread hate against any religion. We just want people to stop the madness.
That's right. That's right.
It's crazy to cut the sexual organs of children.
Let me ask you, the AAP, periodically, they announce their statement on circumcision, whether or not they recommend it or not recommend it. And it's been quite a while since the last statement. Are they going to do it anytime soon?
Well, they've been saying for 2 or 3 years that they are going to, but we haven't seen anything yet. I think that Impact America and people who are in the genital integrity movement and the Impact movement can take credit for that. We've really set them back on their heels by telling them they're not going to get away with it. Last year, a little over a year ago, the AAP released I think we talked about it on the air, an unbelievable statement from the Committee on Bioethics calling for doctors to be able to perform very minor procedure on baby girls.
Oh yes, a nick, like a nick.
The clitoral nick, right?
Yes.
And nick the clitoral skin to draw blood, with the ostensible reason that that way parents wouldn't take the girls back to their home country, Africa. Now, meanwhile, that's not baby girls' home country. Their home country is America, where they're protected against this. So let the doctors perform this genital nick in order to keep the parents from doing something more extensive. And buried in that article, which was actually written by a bioethicist named Dina Davis, it's a statement that many of the prevalent forms of female genital cutting are far less invasive. I don't remember if she used far less, but less invasive than the common forms of male circumcision practice. So she recognized that much of the female genital cutting is less extensive. So her rationale was, this is a long discussion. I'll try to cut to the chase here. Robert Van Hal just published an article. He's a physician, a pediatrician, in the Journal of Medical Ethics, where he went through a discussion, a kind of an examination of why on earth the American Academy of Pediatrics would have come out in favor of this revised female genital cutting. And he first dismissed that it was because there was this hue and cry and parents were just demanding it all over the place, right? I mean, how many parents are demanding that pediatricians perform this procedure? He went through various reasons, and he came to the conclusion that what they were trying to do was lay the groundwork, and keep it safe for male genital cutting. Because they know they have a problem. They know if it's illegal to perform even the most minor surgical procedure on baby girls' genitals, that we have a real problem by saying it's okay to do it to boys. So, again, I think the AAP is scared. I think they know they have no ethical consistency and no ethical leg to stand on, so to speak. The Centers for Disease Control is basing all of their pro-circumcision propaganda, and they also say they're going to release a statement. They haven't yet. They're basing all of it on these 3 so-called randomized clinical trials that took place in sub-Saharan Africa, which seems a pretty weird gold standard, to base a recommendation that you cut American babies because of these studies, on another continent where the methodology and the ethics can't be verified. Again, CDC said 2 years ago they were coming out with a statement. Now they say they are coming out with one this fall. We haven't seen it yet. But we'll be there, and we'll talk to you about it, too. And it'll be a shame on you reaction from the anti-activist community if they dare to suggest that it's desirable to cut baby boys' genitals.
Yeah. I have a feeling that the AAP is still trying to weigh the results out of Africa, whether or not to come out with a statement regarding male circumcision.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy world, right? We know, of course, that medicine is only partly scientific. We know that most physicians are not scientists; they're practitioners, right?
Right.
And we know that they can't possibly research everything and understand the statistics. But if you go into the weeds of these randomized clinical trials, statistics and the confidence interval and statistical significance and who's lost to follow-up and, long-term conversion. And it's very, very, very complicated. And just as the ACLU wants to throw the religion card at us, there are people in the scientific community who want to throw the science card at us. So people have, or actually also the race and the serious problem card. I've had people say to me when I've said circumcision cannot possibly prevent AIDS and it's unethical to be promoting it for that purpose. I've had people get up in my face and say to me, "Have you been to Africa?" In other words, if I cared about the Africans and how sick they are, I wouldn't be saying this. I would be saying, "Hey, go for it."
Yes.
Even if you don't think it works, just go for it.
Yes.
So the science, or people have also said to me, "Are you a physician?" And I say, "Well, no, but I'm a mother. I'm a lawyer. I'm a healthcare executive.
Yes.
And I'm a human being, and I know it's wrong to take a healthy baby and cut part of his body off when he can't agree."
Yes.
And I think that's what we have to focus on. We don't, you don't have to understand the randomized clinical trials from Uganda and Kenya. You don't have to understand them to know that it's wrong to cut the genitals of a newborn baby. You don't have to understand that science. We have protection for girls, and we need protection for boys. Those baby boys are not sick. That foreskin is not causing them any trouble. It's just sitting there protecting their penis. And when they become older and it retracts on its own, it will be a source of sexual pleasure and continued protection of the rest of their penis for the rest of their lives. And most men in the world are intact, and they don't have any trouble as a result. So you don't have to understand heavy-duty statistics and randomized clinical trials to know that the foreskin is a natural, healthy body part, and people have a right to keep their bodies.
That's right.
I heard what a physician at the AAP actually last year said to me, "Hey, nobody has a right to a foreskin." I won't even comment.
What was his rationale?
I don't know. I don't know. You have a right to your teeth. I mean, you have a right. Who does have a right? Okay, if Shelton, if you don't have a right to your foreskin, who does have a right to it?
Right. Somebody else?
Do I have a right to it? I mean, it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
He had no reason for it. No.
And that's one of the most remarkable things I've been told. Another really remarkable thing I've been told by a doctor, which also really, I don't even know why I'm talking about this except to give us some comic relief, said to me, I could be sued for not circumcising a baby. And I don't usually, wear my legal credentials, on a badge. And I just burst out and said, that is ridiculous.
Yes.
I said, you have to cause harm to be sued. You can't be sued for not cutting off a normal body part. You know, it's like, who are these? You know, I mean, but that shows you that's really kind of the one-off anecdotal version of the ACLU coming out and saying, don't let those people vote on this issue because it might cause conflict.
Yes.
I mean, that's really kind of, I mean, you almost want to say, come again? What did you say?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
It's really about as ridiculous a statement as, you know, nobody has a right to a foreskin.
Well, that the mentality behind that statement, of course, is that the foreskin is not a normal, is not a necessary body part.
Not a necessary body part. Even as you started to say, not a normal body part. Like somehow it's an aberration, right?
Right, exactly.
The fact that every man is born with it, and not a valuable body part.
Right, exactly.
And that's a very understandable. Actually, that's an understandable misconception in a society that has taken everybody's foreskin away. Because you can't possibly know what it would feel like to have your foreskin.
That's right.
A woman can't know if she's never been with a man who's intact. A woman can't know what sex would be like with an intact male. So easier to simply dismiss it and say, I'm fine. I don't know, you know, I'm not missing anything.
Right.
And far be it from me to sit and lecture a man or a woman who says that they're sexually content. I mean, that is wonderful. The fact that we have people who are sexually content despite the fact that they're missing an important body part shows that, you know, the range of sexual pleasure that humans are capable of feeling, and that's terrific. But that doesn't mean that we should continue to cut off part of people's sexual organs.
That's right. That's right.
You know, that doesn't mean you can make that decision for me.
That's right. That's right.
That doesn't mean the doctor can make this decision for the baby, or the parent can make the decision for the baby. Because, but there is definitely in a society that, look, you know, I mean, there are literary analogies and literary allegories. You know, about, you know, if everybody was blind or everybody was missing a leg, and you know, then somebody shows up, you know, with two legs, and they're an aberration, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the foreskin is an aberration if you're living in a society that loathes the foreskin and removes it.
Yeah.
A colleague in San Francisco who was working on the ballot initiative got into a discussion in his office with an attorney, with another attorney who he had worked with for years and who he was very friendly with and thought very highly of. They thought very highly of each other. And when she heard that he had put in some pro bono time on this issue, she became absolutely revolted and disgusted. And she told him, you know what we call men with foreskins? We call them dogs. And apparently there's some of your listeners are going to know this. I read after that there's some, this harks back to some, I don't know, religious or literary tradition where, because, you know, of course, dogs are not circumcised.
Right.
Men with foreskins are loathed as lower than men who have been circumcised, and that's just, you know. But we should be beyond thinking that, you know, in 21st century America, correct? I mean, that's such a primitive and ignorant place to be coming from.
Absolutely.
That we shouldn't be, you know, we shouldn't even indulge that conversation. But he was so taken aback, and he walked out and he said, "She's calling my son a dog." Because he has an intact son. She said he was mystified and terribly, terribly, terribly upset by it.
Oh boy, long way to go here. Long way to go
Yeah, but you know what? I started out by being an optimist. I'm going to go back there. Yeah, we got a long way to go, but the circumcision rate's falling. The CDC came out with an article this week that basically said the circumcision rate is falling. Now they might try and say that that's not good, that people should be circumcising their children, but you know what? People know better. They're learning. They're learning there's nothing to be afraid of by leaving their children intact. Many people who made a mistake and circumcised their first child, or who just felt it was a mistake afterwards, have now said, you know what? I'm not circumcising my second child. The more intact men there are, intact boys there are in schools, intact boys there are on sports teams, intact boys and men there are in college, and eventually intact doctors, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're far less likely to find doctors circumcising babies en masse if the doctor's intact.
Yeah, true.
Right? What you're seeing, and intact judges.
Right.
You know, no judge is going to sit there, as a Washington State judge said to our colleague John Geisiker, you know, what's the big deal? I was circumcised, so the kid got circumcised. You know, and this was for a botch, where he didn't uphold the family. You know, what's the big deal? Now, when you have men who are intact sitting on the bench, they're going to know it's a big deal.
Right.
If somebody has, you know, a terrible lifelong sexual impairment because of a badly done circumcision, they're not going to say what's the big deal.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true.
So I think things are changing. The rate now appears to be probably not more than 50% nationally. The CDC released some figures last year that said 33%, but that included only circumcisions in hospitals that were paid for by insurance or Medicaid. Didn't include self-paid circumcisions or circumcisions that took place in a doctor's office. So, but we are way, 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 way down in the number of circumcisions being performed on children and well, of course, in adults also. And I think we're looking at a rate of probably under 50%. It's hard to get your arms around, but it looks like it's under 50% now.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Of course, certain parts of the country it's still very high. Other parts of the country it's negligible. The Midwest still has very, very high circumcision rates.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that just shows you this is not a religious issue in the United States. Anyone who tells you it's a religious issue really doesn't know their demographics at all.
Right, exactly. Well, Georganne, it's always a pleasure speaking with you about this issue. This is
and the pleasure is mine, Shelton.
Absolutely. And again, the website is intactamerica.org. And
correct.
And people can go there and find out a lot more information about this issue and get involved and take action, spread the word.
Get involved in our Put Down the Knife campaign. Love to see people send a letter to the AAP through our website telling doctors to stop circumcising baby boys.
Absolutely.
And many links. I mean, you can. You know, the internet is exploding with circumcision information and information on intactness, and there are many groups out there. Intact America has a Facebook page. There's a Students for Intact America Facebook page and a regular Intact America Facebook page. And, you know, please, I hope your listeners will go and sign on and learn more. And it would be great if people get involved. And it's wonderful having you as a fellow traveler, Shelton.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Oh, wait a minute, Shelton, you're our Intactivist for the month. For August. That newsletter came out. Your listeners need to know that you are our most important person. For Intact America, every month we have an Intactivist of the month, and Shelton is the Intactivist for the month of August 2011, and you can see his picture and read more about him on the intactamerica.org website. That wasn't done to bribe him into giving me another interview on his program. That was done in recognition of his constant and intelligent activism, and we appreciate it so much.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate the honor very, very much. Much appreciated. And it's all about
the picture's not so bad either, right?
It's a very good picture too.
Right.
It's good. Very good. Talented photographer, by the way.
Right.
And
Intact America's own Jennifer Koenig, right?
That's right. Absolutely. And but this is not. This is not about, as you well know, not about anybody in particular. It's about the children and about protecting children, and
that's right.
And creating a more a gentle society.
A more gentle society, keeping people's, giving people an open future, letting people as they grow and as they develop and as they develop their own ideology and beliefs, letting them make their own decisions. I don't see how anybody can possibly argue with that.
I find it hard, but people will.
Right, that's true. Oh, well, I'll take that back.
Listen, thank you so much.
Shelton, again, pleasure's mine.
All right.
Hope to see you soon.
Absolutely. And that was Georganne Chapin of Intact America, president of Intact America, an organization dedicated to protecting children from genital mutilation here and obviously abroad. And we had an extensive discussion about some of the developments here and elsewhere around those issues. You can go to their website at intactamerica.org, intactamerica.org.